Welcome, it's your friendly neighbourhood Badger here, and I'm back with the long-awaited second speculative starter for the upcoming Harvest League, the Sentinel King Kong. Inspired and modelled off my popular Sentinel Queen build, the Sentinel King Kong focuses his damage towards his Herald of Purity minions. A minion Juggernaut, you say? Abso-fruitly. Through Juggernaut, we maintain a high health pool, amazing physical damage reduction, and high resistances, including Chaos Resistance cap, all while our Sentinels whittle down bosses like a lumberjack to a tree. As a league starter, this build focuses more so on clearing with Herald of Agony, a tried and true slow but consistent minion who can help you push the Atlas immensely well. If you are looking for a more damage focused variant of this build, I have also just updated my Sentinel Queen build for 3.11, and you can find the link right down below. Go check that out. But for those beefy bachelors amongst you, you've come to the right place. With updates to keystones now being on the passive skill tree such as Glancing Blows, we can tank our tank up with more tank than you've ever seen tanking before. As a little side note, this build requires some specific investments into certain attributes, mainly dexterity, and balancing gear can be a little tricky, so it's not for a first timer, but I will go over everything in detail through this guide so you know exactly what to expect. Below, you're watching just some gameplay of a cheapish endgame version of this build. It primarily focuses on bossing, as the clear is left a little lacking with a build such as this one, but with a league like Harvest around the corner, slower and safer builds could be very much the new meta. Patch notes for the 3.11 Harvest League have just been released, so this build is as up to date as we can get. There has been some insane nerfs to Herald of Purity minions in general, but they are resilient and this can still punch out some respectable DPS, all while still staying immensely safe. As always, below is the handy color bar for easy navigation. Feel free to pause, jump back and forth, and get all the info you need. And lastly, before we get into the gear and links, I'd just like to say a big thank you for all the support so far. If you want to help me grow even further in the new league, chuck a quick subscribe down below, as there is some pretty cool content planned for the very near future. Plus, I will be tackling hardcore solo self-found for the first time in a league start ever. If you want to come watch me die over and over again and get progressively more jaded towards GGG, you can see it happen live at twitch.tv/thisisbadgergaming, with a link down below. Alright, let's get into it. Alright, now it is time for the budget gear and links for the Sentinel King Kong. Now, I'm only going to be presenting the budget version of this gear because honestly the endgame version is just pretty much the same gear, but just higher values. So we are going to go in depth first of all with the gear, and then we're going to talk about the links on this character. Like my Sentinel Queen build has pretty much always used, we are starting with a Cold Iron Point Ezomite Dagger. Now this Cold Iron Point is pretty much best in slot and is also going to be relatively cheap to get around league start or as you've played for a few days. It's hard to say the exact cost of this, but it's pretty easy to get your hands on. Cold Iron Point is giving you +3 to level of all physical spell skill gems, which is giving +3 to level both to your Herald of Purity and to your Herald of Agony. A really, really massive damage increase. As you can see kind of right down there, the total DPS increase that this one gets, even if I put this into a dual wield, is 44% more damage. However, we are using a shield. That does bring me to the shield, which is Victario's Charity. Victario's Charity is, it's got a good amount of life, some lightning and chaos resistance, but the big nodes here on this shield is the 5% chance to grant a frenzy charge to nearby allies on hit, and lesser so the 10% chance to grant a power charge to nearby allies on kill. You're not going to be granting too many power charges, but the frenzy charges you're going to be hitting a lot with either your Cyclone or your brand skill, and we'll get to that in the skill links in a moment. But this shield is just basically meaning that you're giving frenzy charges generation to all of your Herald of Purities and your Herald of Agony. Super, super strong, really, really good shield. There are a couple of other good variants, even just a good rare shield with good life is pretty nice as well. That does bring us to the helmet itself. The helmet, we're pretty much just looking for socketed minion gems in the helmet. +2 is totally fine with a little bit of life, maybe some chaos res. Now, you don't need to worry too much about that +1 to maximum number of Sentinels of Purity enchant. It is pretty much best in slot, but that's not part of the budget version. You can just go with a normal Hubris Circlet with your socketed minion gems there, and then search for something a little bit later into the league with the +1 maximum number of Sentinels of Purity. That will increase your damage by 25%, which is really, really nice. Alright, that moves us to, I guess you would say, the best and kind of the only choice now for this build, which is the Coming Calamity Destroyer Regalia. This is giving you +2 to level of socketed Herald gems, which we have our Herald of Purity socketed into, and a couple of other mods, but the main one being the mana reservation of Herald skills is always 45%. This does mean that we can link up both our Herald of Purity and our Herald of Agony as much as we want, and we're only going to be reserving 90% of our mana, which still means we've got 10% to be able to cast any other skills we do need. This is just meaning that our mana reservation is pretty much sorted. We don't have to worry about getting mana reservation on the nerfed Circle of Guilt rings, because they are very, very nerfed. And you can just run around, smack some things, and yeah, that's pretty much it. A really, really good chess piece. 5 link's going to be really easy to come by, and a 6 link's going to be relatively cheap as well, which will be pretty good. Alright, that moves us to basically the gloves, the boots. Both of these, you're just looking for good life and good resistances. That's all I really have to say. On the boots, you can get quite a bit of good movement speed, and maybe some chaos res as well on both of these is really going to help you cap everything, as you can see right down here. That brings us to the amulet itself. The amulet, I guess you would say, is one of the more expensive parts of the build, but still pretty easy to come by. All you're looking for is +1 to level of all physical skill gems, or all strength skill gems. And just a bit of life and some resistances, and maybe some attributes on this thing as well. It's probably best that you use a turquoise amulet for dexterity and intelligence, because you do lack a little bit in both of those areas. However, you don't need the physical skill gems mod, it just increases your damage. For endgame, you can even get a +2 to level of physical skill gems and strength skill gems for +2 just from your amulet, which is super, super nice. That's pretty much it there. It does bring me to the rings. I do have a couple of unique rings in here, but you can, first of all, just use any sort of normal ring with life and resistances. That is totally fine, but you're going to be getting a lot more damage out of a Circle of Guilt iron ring with Sentinels of Purity deal increased damage, and also an Essence Worm with Pride socketed into it, which we'll talk about more in the skills section. And then lastly, just looking for a good belt, good life, good chaos res, a little bit of attributes. That's pretty much it. And if you've got a Stygian, just socket any jewel in there that you want. Flasks are fairly self-explanatory. Just a good life flask, another life flask of staunching to remove bleeding, and a Quicksilver. The Writhing Jar is a pretty nice one just to be able to spawn your Sentinels a little bit easier, although you can change this for something like a Basalt Flask is quite nice. And then a Rumi's Concoction just to bump our block up even more. And then with our dual sockets, we're just looking for pretty much some dexterity, maximum life, and chance to block spell damage while holding a shield is quite nice on there as well. Should be fairly easy to come by in any sort of trade league. And then just capping off a little bit more resistances with this last one here. That's pretty much all of the gear. As you can see with the gear itself, it is not quite SSF friendly. You are relying mainly on the Coming Calamity, so you know, if you don't have a Coming Calamity on SSF, this may be a little bit harder to get going. But in the later area of the leveling, we are going to be talking about how to level this character without any gear, just with rares, and it can very easily be done, which is pretty exciting. Great, now let's move over to the skills section itself. First of all, we are going to start with our main links of damage, which are Herald of Purity and Herald of Agony. First of all, in the body armor, in the Coming Calamity, as I did mention, we are socketing a Herald of Purity with Deathmark, Multi-Strike, Brutality, and Minion Damage. That is your 5 link. Now, this is 3 off colors, but it's actually fairly easy to get. You're going to be able to get this pretty easy. And then if you do have a 6 link, it is 4 off colors, all red. Now, you can do this in a couple of different ways, but the new Harvest League as well is probably going to make this pretty easy to color your links off colors. So you don't need to worry too much about that. However, you can add in a couple of other things. You can even switch this melee physical damage for minion speed, which is just going to mean your guys run around heaps more as well. And they also deal some more damage through this attack and cast speed, which is really, really nice. So that's pretty much it with the links there. For our Herald of Agony socketed in our helmet to +2 minions, we're using obviously Herald of Agony, we're using Vicious Projectiles, minion damage, and then Pierce for good clear. Now, as stated in the introduction and the build summary, Herald of Agony is here for your clear. It's pretty nice to just be able to run around with this big spider thing chasing behind you and just clearing mobs. So hopefully this will be dealing enough damage for you. That does bring us to how do we actually proc both our Herald of Agonies and our Herald of Purities. Well, we can do it in a couple of different ways. The traditional way that most Herald of Agony builds use anyway is something like Cyclone, linked with Fortify, and then Poison and Lesser Poison to just cap out our poison on hit to 100%. This is really great for Herald of Agony, means we're stacking up our Herald of Agony virulence as quickly as possible, as well as any rares or uniques that we find circling around them and spawning our Herald of Purities. However, with the new league, I haven't tested it yet because it's not out yet, but I think it would be very good, is actually using Arcanist Brand, linked with Ball Lightning, which is then linked to Poison and Slower Projectiles. You can also, if you want to, switch Slower Projectiles for a lesser poison to have a higher poison percentage, but I think Slower Projectiles will be the better option here. This means you can just put your Arcanist Brand down on the boss or the enemy where you are, and the Ball Lightnings will just be casting automatically around you, poisoning everything in sight, meaning that you're keeping up your Herald of Agony stacks as much as you can and keeping maximum number of Herald of Purities up as much as you can as well. Really good. So that should hopefully be pretty nice for you. Then we basically just move on to a 3-link here with Flame Dash and Second Wind, and then linking Enduring Cry there as well. Well, it doesn't actually have to be linked. Enduring Cry is getting a massive buff for survivability and builds and everything like that, and it's going to help just cap our endurance charges on Juggernaut as quickly as possible, which is going to be really nice. And we can even just link that to left click, because on the tree itself, I'll give you a sneak peek of the tree, we are taking the new notable Call to Arms, meaning our war cry will be instant, which would be very nice. That's pretty much most of the links. We are then going to move to Raise Spectre, which is basically our Raise Spectre setup. Later on in this build guide, there is going to be a little section which is also taken from my normal Sentinel Queen build, which I talk about the Spectres that we are using, but basically we're using some good defensive Spectres. So we've got Raise Spectre linked with Minion Life and Meat Shield, as well as having an Animate Guardian in here as well. And again, we can talk about the Animate Guardian in that section later. That's pretty much it there. Then we have a Pride in our Essence Worm, as we did mention. So this will not be reserving any mana because it is in this Essence Worm here, which means Socketed Gems reserve no mana, which is really great. And then lastly, we've got a little bit of a cast 1 damage taken setup, but this is pretty much up to you, whatever you would like to use here. This is not really a great cast 1 damage taken setup, but you can use anything like Molten Shell, Steel Skin. Enfeeble's a really great curse to have in here, and you can just balance the levels as much as you want, and you have another link there to get in what you need. That is pretty much it with the gears and links. If you want the PASTEBIN, again, it is right down below. You can definitely check that, but we are going to jump right on over to the skill tree section. See you there. Hey guys, it's Badger here from 2 seconds in the future. We are back for the passive skill tree options for the Sentinel King Kong. We're going to start with the Ascendancy because that's one of the main points of this build, is choosing the Juggernaut Ascendancy. Why Juggernaut for a minion build? The damage is a lot lower than something like a Necromancer, and a little bit lower than something like a Guardian, but we do get tankier. Obviously, being a Juggernaut, endurance charges are our game. We are mainly looking at endurance charges for good physical damage reduction, elemental damage reduction, elemental resistances, chaos damage, you know, there's a lot in there. But basically, the choices we're taking for the Ascendancy are this: Unflinching, straight into Unrelenting for our normal and cruel labs, giving us, you know, just great resistances and damage reduction all around. And then it's your choice for the Merciless and Uber Lab respectively, whether you're going to be using Unbreakable or Unstoppable. Unstoppable is probably the better softcore option, and Unbreakable is the better hardcore option. These are both really good nodes, both great for defenses and everything like that. I would probably say to start with Unstoppable though, because you cannot be stunned with this node, which is really nice because Cyclone got a bit of a nerf to it with its stunning immunity. Let's say it doesn't exist anymore. That's pretty much the options for the Ascendancy, so we're going to go into the tree itself. Now, the tree is quite stretched out, as you can see, as I just look at this right open like this. But basically, it's fairly straightforward. We're picking up as much life as we can. As we can see, we have 200% increased life on the tree. We come from the Marauder start, all the way through, straight to Warrior's Blood, Heart of the Warrior, Born to Fight, and right up through here. We can then easily pick up Constitution, or we can come around to Resolute Technique and down into Barbarism, Stamina, and then some Dual Sockets, and down to Juggernaut, and then picking up some Endurance Charge and Life down here as well. Before heading down here though, it's probably a better option for you to head up and grab some Grave Pact minion nodes, as well as some minion damage, Righteous Army, Spiritual Aid, all of this kind of stuff, and then also picking up the new Glancing Blows node on the tree with some block and shield nodes right here. Lastly, we do finish off up into Sacrifice and Spiritual Command, getting some more Chaos resistances through Purity of Flesh, Anointed Flesh for maximum elemental resistances, which couples very nicely with Soul of Steel, which has always been on the tree. This new one is another +1 to maximum elemental resistances, bringing us to 77, 77, 78 maximum resistances. Very nice defenses. And then capping everything off with Enduring Bond and just a bit more life through here. That's pretty much it for that. And if you do need the leveling tree, basically I've just done the best leveling options all the way 20, 40, 60, 80, and 100 points for this build, which is pretty nice. And then lastly, the end game just finishes off with this last little bit here. That is pretty much it with all of that. Now, some of you may ask, why am I not using any cluster jewels? Basically, I have just done a video a little bit earlier about cluster jewel nerfs to Herald of Purity and Herald of Agony, basically. I've decided to pretty much forego cluster jewels just to give it, you know, a little bit more of an easy start, because we still don't know exactly how rare or common cluster jewels will be to be able to obtain. So that's pretty much all I can say there. There are good cluster jewel options just in large minion cluster jewels where you can get good impale nodes and other things like that. But for the most part, this is where we're going to be sitting. This puts out a very respectable 630,000 DPS per Herald of Purity Sentinel, which are going to be reaching 4 to 5 of these. And then with our Herald of Agony, we're putting out 331,000, which is basically just for your clear, which is super, super nice. And that Herald of Agony crawler cannot die, which is also very, very good. That's pretty much it for the passive skill tree options. Just thinking, have I missed anything? Pretty much not. That's all that is sitting right there. Next, we are going to be talking about some leveling tips, and then we're going to be getting into Spectre data. All right, see you soon. The Sentinel King Kong is fairly easy to level. It's not the fastest leveler, but it's fairly safe and has good bossing damage. So if you struggle during bosses on leveling, this build's going to be totally fine for you. What we're going to do for this short little leveling section is just go through all of the acts where you're going to be collecting gems, talk about the gems that are best to pick up, and how you can pick them up, and how you can level up until you actually even use your Sentinel of Purity and Agony. So, first of all, we are starting right here in Act 1. With Nessa, basically, we want to actually just be starting melee at the very beginning. Any sort of melee damage, slams are actually going to be really, really good, hopefully for the leveling process in the new league. So we can use Perforate even is a level 1 gem. Picking up Smite as well is going to help us once we get to Herald of Purity, Herald of Agony to give them a little bit of a buff. Then you're just picking up any sort of damage nodes, or gems I should say, that you want. Chance to Bleed is really nice, even picking up Maim support and other things like added fire damage, and just trying to upgrade your weapon along the way. You can then get any movement skill that you want, but Dash is pretty nice, better than Frostblink, so I'd definitely use Dash. That's pretty much all you are going to be picking up in this first area here, so let's move to number 2. In Act 2, we are going to be talking to Yena. We're also going to be getting, you know, quest rewards, but if you ever need to get anything that you do need, you can just go to the second tab in any of these vendors and pick up gems that you do need. There's only a couple of gems we're really looking for in Act 2, the main one being one of our main skills, Herald of Purity. Picking up Herald of Purity and even just linking it to something like melee physical damage or even faster attacks so they hit a little bit faster is a great way of going about all of this. We can even then pick up Flesh and Stone. You might not be able to run this with the mana reservation, but if you can, it's good to put that on as well. And then picking up Enduring Cry as well. Basically, you pick this up, and then you can just socket it in wherever you want, and you can change your left click all the way just to an Enduring Cry. And just as you're moving around, basically, that's just going to proc whenever the cooldown is up. It's a really, really handy little tip, especially if you've got the instant War Cry node. It's going to be super, super helpful. That's pretty much it from Act 2. Let's pop on over to Act 3, because we're going to be picking up a lot in Act 3. In Act 3, the best place to get your gems is actually going to be after completing a certain quest. This quest is the quest called a Fixture of Fate. A Fixture of Fate is in the library where you talk to Siosa here and you go and collect 4 golden pages. Once you complete this mission, you can then talk to Siosa and purchase any gems from any character up until this point, which is meaning that we're just going to be collecting pretty much everything that we do want. First of all, we are going to be wanting to pick up our Cyclone. So Cyclone's going to be really, really nice to be able to proc our Poison, Herald of Agonies, Herald of Purities, and everything like that, so you can pick that up. Make sure you just bring a little bit of currency here to be able to purchase the ones that you do need. Cyclone's going to be very, very helpful, and then we're linking Cyclone with things like Poison support, and lesser Poison support, and then also things like Fortify, if we have a look here. Fortify right there. We then are going to be picking up our Herald of Agony. Well, I did spell that wrong, so Herald. Herald of Agony is going to be picked up here, and then you can link Herald of Agony just to Pierce, and that's going to be enough for some good clear as you're going through the mapping, or I should say leveling experience. So just a 2-link Herald of Purity, and then maybe a 3-link, if you can fit a 4-link in your Herald of Purity, would be really, really nice as well. After that, we're just looking for just a couple of other things. We can even pick up our Raised Spectre. Spectre right here, but we're probably not going to be raising Spectres right now because they're going to die quite easily. We've got to wait a little bit later until we start summoning those. And that's pretty much it from that section. Lastly, we're just finishing up with things like whether we pick up like a Death Mark for our Herald of Purities, or we can pick up some more melee stuff like oh, wait, no brutalities later on, never mind. Just picking up things like, yeah, your melee physical damage, and then multi-strike will be in Act 4, which we'll jump over to right now. In Act 4, we're only picking up a couple of options for our Sentinel of Purity. Now, I am doing this live on stream. Thank you so much, Fuzzy Peach AU, for the follow. But basically, we're just selecting pretty much multi-strike and brutality are going to be our 2 gems right here. Now, we're not going to be able to socket these all into Herald of Purity straight away, but they're going to be really nice to switch in when we can and when we have enough mana reservation. So just give it a test. I would definitely say multi-strike is one of the best options to use in your Herald of Purity for damage, but brutality is going to be a lot more as well. Alright, let's jump on over. In Act 6, lastly, we're just talking to Lily Roth. Lily Roth is going to be able to sell us anything we may have missed, as well as stuff that we weren't able to pick up on the Marauder itself. One thing that we haven't been able to pick up yet, and is not with Lily Roth yet, is the Arcanist brand, a new skill coming in 3.11. You will be able to pick this up just from tab 5, right here. Probably, I'd say even, yeah, around about here, I say Arcanist brand would be. You can pick that one right up, as well as Ball Lightning to be able to proc Arcanist brand, Ball Lightning, and the poisons. I think that this is going to be a really, really good way to be able to proc your Herald of Purities and Herald of Agony, so definitely give it a go and let me know how that functions in the comments below if you are going to be league starting this build. That's it for the leveling process. From here, just keep upgrading your gear with just good life and resistances and you're going to be absolutely fine. Firstly, I will talk about the monster They of Tool. This Spectre can be summoned in a Tool Breachlord's domain, and grants a snowstorm on the ground whenever he punches it, giving it 20% attack dodge, 20% spell dodge, and 15% reduced damage taken while standing inside. This is a crazy good defensive layer on top of all of our block chants. The second Spectre is an Arena Master, which can be summoned from any Drox influenced zone. Look for monsters bashing their shields. This shield bash actually gives a massive buff to everyone around, like a war cry, granting 40% movement speed, as well as attack and cast speed for 2 seconds on around an 8-second cooldown. These 2 Spectres are the best I have found for this setup on the Sentinel Queen. The Animate Guardian setup is something that is very helpful, but also very risky, as all expensive Animate Guardian setups are. This setup involves the following items: Kingmaker for Culling Strike and Fortify Aura, Garb of the Ephemeral for massive defenses through no crits being able to be taken and not being able to be slowed below base movement speed, Mask of the Stitch Demon, which, coupled with the anointment on your amulet being Grave Intentions, gives insane amount of life regen per second, basically meaning he cannot be killed by anything other than one-shots. Victario's Flight for an aura move speed buff, and Southbound Gloves to help with % life increases for survivability. I am blazing through this section, I know, but the main rule here is, if you want an Animate Guardian, always be willing for the chance of him to die. It can happen sometimes, so beware, it is very much a luxury. And that's pretty much it for the Sentinel King Kong build, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I'm just leaving you with a fairly scuffed Sirus kill, but this is Awakener level 8 on quite a bit of a budget. So the damage is pretty much there, tankiness is pretty good, but we do die a couple of times due to, obviously, the crazy laser. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and until next time, Badger out.